Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast, and I am your host. And the Muddy Waters podcast exists because the mainstream media is failing the people of Maine and is not educating people on anything, let alone what's going on here in the state of Maine. When they do deal with politics, for the most part, they either play the PR arm of the Democrat Party, unfortunately, or they're just pushing you to national politics. And one of the reasons it's really important for us to pay attention to what and know what's going on locally is because local is actually where we have so much more ability and capacity to positively impact the world around us. And unfortunately, the media is constantly pushing us to the national stage, and we're largely focused on what's going on there. So this is why the Muddy Waters podcast exists, to bring in people who are experts from here in the state of Maine, who know what's going on in the state of Maine, and how the policies are impacting people here. So that may be representatives, business owners, former politicians, political activists, or just average moms or dads who just have a story to tell about what's going on in our world. So that's kind of why we exist, is to kind of educate the people of Maine. One of the things that you can do at home is you can share these videos, or you can share those shorter clips that we end up putting out, which are a lot more digestible for the majority of people. But this is why we exist. This is what we try to do. We want the people of Maine to be better educated about what's going on in the political realm. And if you're paying attention, one of the things that you've probably heard and been paying attention to my podcast especially, is about the issue of girls sport, protecting women's sports. So this weekend, we had a rally. We had a couple of different events. Actually, there was an event on Friday through Turning Point USA with somebody from the Riley Gaines office, and then we also had a rally on Saturday. With a special speaker and like kind of the champion, we'll say, of the detransition movement. Chloe Cole was there. Great events, and kind of following that up, probably not directly related, is today the Department of Health and Human Services, I believe, found the state of Maine, the Maine Department of Education, the Maine Principals Association, and the School of Greeley to be in violation of Title IX, and as a result, they're going to be referred to the Department of Justice. So that's interesting. It's a development. It's not good that it's happening, because we wish that we weren't in this place. But at the very least, we're thankful that somebody's actually doing something and has interest to protect our girls. If you haven't watched this yet, there's a video on my page by a girl named Cassidy Carlisle, who will be on the podcast next week, and she shares a story about how when she was 13, she was forced to change in front of a boy, and was basically told that she was transphobic or whatever, and she basically wouldn't be able to play if she didn't do this. And anyway, just at 13 to be able to have to deal with that is absolutely ridiculous in my mind. But anyway, so that was this weekend. But today, we're going to be having a Maha conversation. We're focused on making America healthy again. And we have with us a special guest to kind of talk a little bit about that, because I'm not the expert. That's the other thing. I bring on experts. I learn along the way, but we bring people on to help you better understand what's going on in our world. And so we're blessed to have with us Jen Goddard. Jen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, with one of the things that, I usually do with my guests, and I'd love to have some opportunity. So to have you kind of talk about, who you are, what your background is, and let people know like your credentials and what you do for work, and again, how that relates to I think people will very quickly see how that relates to the idea of Maha. And then we can get into a little bit of what you're doing on a political podcast, given that you care, what you're primarily concerned with people's health.
Yeah. So I own a holistic health practice. We're in Brewer, Maine right now. We're relocating to Bangor in about a month. So we're really excited about that. We have, for myself, I'm certified as a holistic health practitioner. So we focus more on that root cause healing, preventative, nutrition, lifestyle, herbals, homeopathy, all that good stuff. And just helping people understand how their body heals and that it can heal even because, I know in my health journey and a lot of my clients, they come to me saying, well, I was told it didn't matter how I ate. I was told that it didn't matter what no matter what changes I made, I would still need XYZ medication. So they feel powerless. And I also work with a primary care doctor, Dr. Jen Goddard. She's here in the office as well. And for all those seeking primary care, you hear that complaint all the time. I can't find a primary care doctor. My appointments are 5 minutes long and all they do is throw a prescription at me. If you want a holistic primary care, we have one here. Dr. Jen Goddard is amazing. And we make sure that we find the clients that are the right fit for our practice, that want something a little bit deeper, more of a root cause approach, that want to heal. They don't want just a prescription. So we do have availability because, we want to make sure that we're working with the right people too. So it's really, we work together as a team. We do thermography here. We have detox foot baths and PEMF. So all kinds of tools and things that we can pull together to help someone and create a healing program for them so that they can experience a completely different quality of life than they were told was possible. So that's what we do here.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said so much in such a short period of time about all the things that you do, but I don't think anybody in America is going to sit here and say that they think the healthcare system is working. Right? I think everybody's in agreement. The Democrats, essentially, the most of them anyway, would say that that's because we need more government paid, government sponsored healthcare, and that would fix the problem. And Republicans have their own different views, but the reality is we all recognize that there's a problem, and you've highlighted a couple of things, and again, really quickly, that I just want to point to is one of the biggest problems is that doctors it's kind of a symptom of the system, right? Rather than blaming the doctors particularly, it's a systemic problem that's far above the doctors. Administrators probably are the primary, and drug companies and insurance companies. Those are the primary culprits, but doctors literally have 5 minutes with their patients. Mm-hmm. And don't really have the time to really be able to understand what's actually going on with their patients in order to be able to address it. And the system, you kind of mentioned that, this people are led to believe that the solution is drugs, and that's obviously a problem. One of the trends that's happened kind of as a result of this is direct primary care, which those doctors actually spend more time. The idea is you just pay a monthly fee to them, and then when you need to go to them, you go to them. So that's a good.
Well, that's the model that we've kind of embraced. Yeah. But instead of charging, they charge a yearly fee, a membership fee, whether you see that doctor or not. In our case, we decided as long as we possibly can, we're not going to do the yearly membership fee. You just pay for what you use. So this way, if you don't see the doctor that year, you don't pay. But it's exactly the direct primary care model. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you actually get to sit with your doctor for an hour at a time, or however long is necessary. Appointments are probably an hour long. Yeah. No, that's really awesome. I think what we are interested in, what we need as a society, is holistic healthcare, which is exactly what you're talking about. So, do you want to kind of go into some of the nuance of what you do? And because I think it's really interesting. I want to know more, and it's really interesting because I think I could talk about the problems. Doctors don't have enough time and what their solutions are. But I'd love to hear from you about what are, or maybe what are some of the big problems that you're hearing that you guys are able to help people fix so that they can be more healthy?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is just helping them to understand that it's possible. Because like I said, we're even with my own health journey, I had tons of health issues myself, PCOS, GERD, acid reflux, all the things. And I was on antidepressants, I was on anxiety medication, I was on sleeping pills, migraine medications. And then they recommended hormone replacement therapy to me. I had to do infertility treatments to get pregnant with my second son. So my health was a mess. And then my mom was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and I had to get my first colonoscopy. I was 29 years old, and they found tumors all throughout my colon. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm watching my mom with an ostomy bag, and I'm looking at the state of my health. And I was like, this isn't working. Something's wrong. And if I can prevent even an ounce of what she's experiencing right now, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to save that what she's going through. That pain, right? So that's what made me first stop and think I have to try, even though despite what they told me, I have to try. I just have to at least try. Even if at the end of the day I get the same result, I have to try. This is what I'm thinking, right? And that's what a lot of people are thinking when they come to me too. I'm the desperate Hail Mary, right? Nothing else has worked. The pain has gotten to the point where I don't want to live this way. So I want to keep trying to find an answer, but nothing has worked. And I don't know if I have much of a belief system yet, but it's the Hail Mary. I'm going to try it. Let's see what happens. And, we work with them on their nutrition. We work with them on their lifestyle. And half the time, I mean, you get all different ranges, right? And sometimes they don't even know what protein is. And sometimes, they know and they might be eating healthy. And once they've gotten to a healthy place with their nutrition, it's not always enough to heal the damage that's been done from the past. So that's where the supplementation can come in. And it's like, like I said, we'll use herbals. Sometimes it's whole food vitamins. Sometimes, it's the homeopathics. So we go in and we create a program specifically for them, because I could have 5 women with menopause symptoms and all 5 of them are going to need something different. And as their body's healing, it's going to need different support throughout that process. It's like building a house. The first guy you have come in, he's going to need concrete for the foundation, and he's going to need a certain skill set, right? And certain types of tools. Well, once that foundation is laid, then you're going to move on to the framework, and you need timber, and these are different guys. And that's how your body heals too. So to just give you some supplements, just like I wouldn't just give you a medication and say, all right, I'll see you next year. Let's see how you're making out. It doesn't really make sense, because if your body's healing, it's going to need different tools and different resources. So we meet with them on a regular basis to make sure that we move with the body as it's healing and can stay on top of that, because all of these things, you could name 10,000 supplements and they could all be good for something, but is it good for what you need when you need it? Doors are wonderful when you're building a house, but if you're installing windows, doors do you no good, right? So I find that to be a helpful analogy to help people understand that their body goes through this process. And it's really helpful to have someone standing outside, not in the mud, right, that can hold that bigger picture and help walk you through it, and has the other resources to complement that as well. Like I said, with the MD, with Dr. Jen Goddard, she is amazing and she can work alongside you. And so instead of going to your doctor and saying, let's say you have diabetes diagnosis, and saying, hey, I want to get off my metformin, and they send you to a dietitian that tells you to drink Ensure and eat Cheerios, all these terrible things that I would never tell someone to eat, right? And they're like, I got frustrated because I didn't get a response. I'm still on my metformin, my blood sugar is still going through the roof, and I still have all of these issues. So, they feel defeated and they feel like there's no hope. So when they come here, they have a very different experience, because they actually get the outcome that they're looking for, and they need a doctor to be able to work with them. I had one patient one time, and she was diabetic, and I said, well, look, when you start eating better, your blood sugar is going to start to drop too low. So are you comfortable speaking with your doctor about that? I want you to keep track of everything. So, you're equipped with the answers that he's going to ask, to the questions he's going to ask. And she said, oh, yeah, definitely. So sure enough, her blood sugar started dropping too low. She started getting lightheaded and dizzy. She was nervous she was going to pass out. She called her doctor, and her doctor said, nope, I'm not adjusting that medication. You need to eat more carbohydrates. That's exactly what she was told. And this woman went and she ate more carbohydrates, and that was the end of her health journey. And that's sad to me. It's terrible, because, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of motivation to go through a health journey. It's not easy. It's hard until it's easy. That's what I tell people. It's only hard till it's easy. It does get easy. But in the beginning, it is hard. It is challenging. It takes a commitment. So to just be told, oh, no, don't do that, I'm not going to work with you on your med. So you need a doctor that believes in you too, right? And believes in your desire to heal and your ability to heal, that can help you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the challenges, I have a good friend he's a physician's assistant, part of the system, we'll say. But I think one of the challenges that he says is like he's in a position where he would love to give people better advice, right? But the people just don't want it. Like they want.
Very common too.
This is one of the problems that we have with our world, is that people don't want to actually fix the problem if they can medicate it away and get the result that they want there. And that's one of the challenges they face in the healthcare system. Again, doctors who actually want to help. So it's important to know that, like, you have to. It's hard work. This is not easy. But I mean, that describes just about every aspect of the brokenness in our society. Is that, like, we actually don't have any easy fixes. It's much more complicated than that, and especially when it comes to health. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been lied to think that this Band-Aid is better. We think
Yeah.
that it's like taking the fire alarm out of the burning building. Well, we'll just take the fire alarm out. You're not going to hear the fire alarm anymore. So then we think, oh, well, my blood works fine now because of your medication. It does not mean that the building's still not on fire. Trust me, it is still ablaze. It is still going to burn the house down, and you're still going to have long-term issues in your health, regardless of whether or not you hear that fire alarm. So part of it is they've been lied to think that this pill will take it away, and it's not. It's just taking the alarm out.
Right. Yeah. It's again, it's a sad state of affairs of how we've gotten here. But it's one of those things where I think it's similar to how I feel about the education system in our world, which is that we were just, as a culture, by and large, just asleep at the wheel. And now we have a system that's all structured around those quick fixes, those quote unquote easy solutions that also, all those medications also have side effects, and then people end up taking medications to deal with the side effects from the other medications. All the while, it's not, fixing the problem. It's I was making the comment that the healthcare system in America is like health decline management.
Sick care. It's not healthcare.
Yeah,
It's sick care.
sick care. Yeah,
And
yeah. I
it's
was. Oh, go
okay.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I was on SSRIs, was some of the medication that I was on when I was
Yeah.
younger, and when I did my genetic testing later on in life, and it helped me to understand, how my body functions. We think that, well, it's genetic, so there isn't anything I can do, and that's so far from the truth. So when I did mine, I found genetically I don't respond well to SSRIs, and yet I was on them for a very long time. And there's a database where you can look up your medication and it'll tell you what deficiencies that medication will create. So not only was I like a dog chasing my tail, this SSRI I was getting frustrated. I was on it for over a decade. Then I'm depressed because now not even this will work, right? I must be really, really broken, and
Yeah.
everything that comes along with that. But then when you look up the medication, it creates a deficiency in melatonin, it creates a deficiency in sodium. Well, what do you think the side effects were? I ended up on sleeping pills because I didn't know this. I ended up on migraine medication, 3 different kinds, because I didn't know. One of them, they had me on Vicodin. I was on Vicodin for a month straight. I was so numb on top of my other just to try to get these headaches to go away. And I had no idea that all I needed to do was drink water and electrolytes because I was deficient in sodium. And it's like these things we're led to believe they're so complicated, and sometimes they're so simple, you know.
Yeah, well, I think again, it gets back at the fact that, like, when people are meeting with their doctor's not actually taking a deep dive. So, if you're not meeting with like an alternative kind of medicine thing, or or what do they call them? Direct primary care, where you actually have time to meet with your doctor. Your doctor can actually know you rather than just knowing your chart. Like, I think these are things that we have to get back to as a society. So I think one of the concerns that people would have, because it seems like, okay, in order for people to like do what you're doing, it has to be expensive, because if it's going to take so much time, you're actually going to spend that with people, come up with these plans, really understand their situation. I think one of the concerns that people would have is it would be too expensive, it would be cost prohibitive.
Well, it does take an investment, right? Like, for example, with the direct primary care, you compare that to your health insurance where you pay, your deductible, you go to PCHC, for example, you pay your copay and you see your primary care for really next to nothing, right? But the downside to that is that your primary care, like we talked about, gets 5 minutes with you because they're on an insurance model. So they've got to turn out the patients in order to meet the overhead, right? So whether they want to spend time with you or not, they don't have the option. Where on this side, yeah, for her, most direct primary care, the membership fee starts at like $1,500 for a single person for the year. Like I said, whether you see the doctor or not. Dr. Generlette's $275 for a visit with her. She'll take an hour with you, longer if needed. I've seen her there for longer in some cases. And whatever you need to really get the job done. And you're going to get a completely different outcome. So what some people are doing that work with people like us is they will put more money into like an HSA account or an FSA account. And even if your job doesn't offer one, you can go to your local bank, and some of them have HSA accounts that you can open up outside of your where you work. And so instead of putting all of their money into their health insurance plan and getting a more expensive health insurance plan that probably still doesn't cover anything anyway, then they'll put that money into more of an HSA account or an FSA and be able to use those funds for people like us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely something that's worth it. I mean, again, most of your healthcare situations, there are certain times where I think they can make sense, but most of the health insurance that I've experienced doesn't really cover you enough the way that you need it. And if your only option is to go to doctors that don't actually take the time to care about you, then you got to look for other options. And I think the ability to take advantage of an HSA is really good. In most a bank that I used to work for, so it got a lot of HSAs. So like a lot of most of the industry is shifting to insurance plans where you can utilize an HSA, especially for their cheaper plans. So it's definitely something. Usually, what's interesting and this is like I think this relates to the conversation a lot, is like usually the main reason why people didn't pick those cheaper plans is because they had prescriptions, and the prescriptions are expensive, and so we want to have the higher insurance plan that'll help cover the prescriptions. But like, are those prescriptions necessary? So, when you work with somebody, how often do you see them like drop medications? If that makes sense?
Well, just to clarify, I do not take anyone off of medications. I don't give them any kind of medication counts. I always refer them back to their doctor, whether that be
Yep.
Dr. Jen Goddard or whoever their doctor is, because that's their job. However, the blood work will change, just like that woman with the blood sugar. Your blood sugar is going to change. The evidence is going to be there that, okay, some kind of adjustment needs to be made. And they come off of their medications all of the time because it's no longer needed. Whether it's their blood pressure, whether it's cholesterol, any of these issues, we do CIMT ultrasounds here in the office. We fly someone in every 6 months to evaluate that. So we give them the tools that they need to make the decisions with their doctors that they need to make. And we should, with the direct primary care model, it's important to also point out that even though your insurance doesn't cover your visit with the doctor, if you need blood work, if you need an MRI or whatever those tests are, they can still go through your insurance as normal. So it's literally only the visit with the doctor that isn't covered by your insurance plan. So I think that's important too. And a note back on the cost, like for example, when I first started my health journey, I got a statement because in my case, all of my practitioners were under the same business. They were at my chiropractor's office. So all the supplements I got were at the chiropractor's office. Everything was there. So at the end of the year, I got my statement for my taxes, right? So my ex-husband at the time, he looked at it and he said, "Oh my gosh, this is what you've spent this year on this." And I said, "Hold on, wait a minute." And I went back to my previous year and I collected every receipt because I still had it all for my taxes. And what I had spent on copays and medications and everything else, which that year, obviously I had none of. I had supplements and I had all my holistic people right on the other list. And it was still less than I paid the year before in the medical system. And you want to know the biggest difference? In the medical system, my costs were only going higher every single year because I was only getting sicker and sicker and sicker. In this model, I'm only getting healthier and healthier and healthier, and I require less and less and less. So this is only going to go better. That system was not. So that's another big difference too.
Yeah, no, it's a really helpful, I think story. And I think you're absolutely, I think again, the way that the mainstream medical practices are run, they're not focused on actually fixing the underlying problem. We medicate when people have anxiety, and they probably, amongst other things, need counseling. They need to figure out how to cope with life and develop healthy coping mechanisms. Instead of doing that, they're given SSRIs. And when they have high cholesterol, they're not really strongly encouraged to change their diet. They're encouraged to take cholesterol medication. I had what was it? I was borderline, or what do they call it, in high blood pressure at one point. And my doctor was like, "Well, we should probably put you on, some, high blood pressure medication." I was like, let's just let me make some adjustments to my life. Cause I've historically, outside of omeprazole, which you probably would tell me if I was your patient on what I need to do to get rid of that. But outside of omeprazole, I have effectively avoided any kind of like long-term medication intentionally, because like, I don't want to be owned by any type of medication. I don't want drugs to like control my life, right? And I think that's a dangerous path that many people go down. And so I'd avoided them. And so like when my doctor said that, I'm like, I think we're going to try another option. And so I made some adjustments, and the next time we tested, I was fine. Since then, every time I test, I'm fine. And so, like, I think like the medical system is not doing good. So this leads us into like the political conversation. And like one of the things that every time I have this conversation with somebody is this shouldn't be a political conversation. But it is because because I think that the pharmaceutical companies and the big healthcare and big food have such a vested interest in people being unhealthy, I think is a big part of it. But yeah, so like, how does this? So this leads into I guess the political conversation of Bobby Kennedy and just kind of where you are on that. I think this is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I make America healthy again. I mean, regardless of how you feel about Trump, I think that we could all come and stand by. Yes, we need to do something different. The system, like you said, is not working, right? So, and part of it is things like informed consent. You should know what you're putting into your body. It's not you're not allowed to do that. It's you just should have an awareness and be able to trust what you're being told, right? Medical ads on TV, we're only one of how many countries that allow that, the transparency just isn't there. And I'm a firm believer in we need to do more preventative work. And so many of these, even with COVID, the major risk factors, the comorbidities were all preventable. So imagine if we shut down McDonald's, instead of shutting down churches, how much of a difference we might have been able to make, or had cooking classes or taught them, what was, and again, this is the system. Even if they had cooking classes, they would have told them Ensure and Cheerios were healthy. That's the first thing they told me to eat oatmeal. I'm like, ugh. So they don't tell you, oh well, those oats need to be soaked and all of this stuff. They don't tell you any of these other things, and other than that, it's just toxic. So it's all the details that they leave out that are very, very important and make a big difference in the outcome. So
so prior to like Bobby Kennedy kind of entering the fray, so to speak, were you somebody who was engaged in politics, or did did you just kind of go about your day like I think most Americans do?
No, I mean, I dabbled in it a little bit. There were times when I was more engaged than others. And, depending, I know Trump, I was not, and I am not a fan of Trump. I am not. I am registered as a Democrat because I did want to vote for Kennedy in the primary. And, but before that, for most of my life, unless there was a primary that I wanted to vote in, and I voted for Republicans in primaries, and I voted for Democrats in primaries. But unless I was voting for someone in particular, I was unregistered or an independent. And because I really felt like I wanted to be able to vote for the person that I believed in and not a political party. And I didn't want to be tied to that. So, I mean, I was a person who has a sign at home when Trump was president before, and it said anyone but Trump. And then I learned what anyone but Trump could mean, and so I felt really let down by the Democratic Party. I was really disappointed. I was hurt that they left me with no option but to feel like I had to vote for Trump, who I despised so much. So that's where I was politically before.
Yeah. So well, I think it's like there's a lot of people that fall into this category, and I can understand. I think there's a couple of things that I would say is like one of it, I think for a lot of people is it's shaped by the way in which the media presents Donald Trump, and then how I think like how visceral people's reactions are to him. Like I know that like I don't even like I feel like this kind of I don't know like I worked in banking, and anyway in a lot of different circles that I would find myself just I wouldn't want to bring up the name Donald Trump because of how negative the conversation would go. You know what I mean? Whether you're pro or anti, that somebody is going to be upset with you. And so if you bring up Donald Trump, it's like all of a sudden I remember actually this blew me away. This was in like 2021, maybe 2022. I'm trying to think of when it was. And I was hanging out with some friends of mine. and the Mike Pence's name came up in conversation, and like the attitude and the tone in the at the campfire, we'll say, was one that's very similar to like a whole bunch of cats hissing. Like that's not, nobody did that, but like that was what it felt like. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And like the hate and vitriol that people have for Donald Trump, I think like shifts people and makes people like dislike him on the one side more than they need to, or not want to talk about them. But and I do think that Trump has some flaws. Like he's not a perfect human being. So if you're out there watching, I do support a lot of what he does policy wise. I do think that there's a lot of things that he could do better. On the one hand, though, what I will say is like I'm appreciative to a degree of that I hear everything I hear, in the sense that at least with Trump, you kind of know what he's thinking. Sometimes you wish you didn't.
Oh, you always know what he's thinking.
Right. But and that's like in politics, like having somebody that you know what they're thinking, and you're not worried about what they're thinking behind closed doors and what their real plan is. I mean, you talk about like what you found out what anything but Trump would look like, and it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known this right beforehand. I think a lot of people who voted for Biden, have buyer's remorse. There's still a lot of hate amongst them for Trump, and so they might not have wanted to be with him. But like I think there's a lot of it's that, and then the way in which he's characterized. My dad in particular was somebody who just thought of Trump as being purely evil in 2020. He still doesn't like Trump, but I think he's in a place where he realizes that a lot of like what was impacting that was like what the media pushes about him. But either way, there are definitely flaws in Trump, and I think one of the things that I would say is like I think a lot of people would love to have a president that was both honest and did what they said they were going to do, and was also nice and kind and generous in person. You know what I mean? Like that we don't really see so much of that. Trump is great if you're one of his people, but if you're like on the other side, he can be very very I don't know, we'll say bold. He can speak loudly and in ways that I think some of my friends have made comments that like, I don't want to vote for the guy that I don't want my kids to talk like, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't want this to be their role model.
Right. Exactly. And my response to that is usually like, I totally get it, but like, we got to look at policy, and like if we got to choose between this and this, well,
if we scan out, we look at the bigger picture. He has other people on his team, like Kennedy and like Tulsi Gabbard, and hopefully, I think this time around for me, I think he's smart enough to realize that he didn't do a very good job before, and he wants to leave on a different note. And I think he realizes this is his opportunity to maybe do something different. Now, did that change so far everything? No, there still have been lots of issues so far, but hopefully in the bigger picture, that's what's changed, I think, in his decision to surround himself with better people this time.
Yeah. Well, I think he would even say, like, going into it, I don't think he really thought he had a chance of winning in 2016. He was running, and he obviously was hoping to win, but he didn't really know what he was doing. I think he'd never spent more than a couple of days in his life in D.C., and really it was an outsider completely. And he ended up having to trust people that he shouldn't have trusted. And so he definitely did a lot better of a job. I mean, of assembling a team than in 2024 than he did in 2016. I mean, the people that he's put around him, many of them former Democrats, like with Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, as you mentioned, who was at one point the darling of the Democrat Party until she started asking questions that apparently you're not allowed to ask. And even Elon Musk, who was contributed to and voted for Biden in 2020, and even in early 2021. I mean, he was one of the key funders for the DeSantis campaign. This is somebody that Trump was eventually able to bring in, without which I don't think I don't think he wins in 2024 without a lot of these things. So, so I think one of the questions I have for you is like, do you think that had Bobby as a Bobby Kennedy supporter, right? Because it sounds like
Mhm.
that's where we could
Yeah, I volunteered on
classify
his
you.
campaign. Mhm.
So do you want to just describe what it was like for you to kind of watch what happened to him throughout the course of his process, and then also, or maybe however you want to answer this, like if Bobby doesn't endorse Trump, do you vote for Trump?
No, I would not have. Yeah. It I voted for the people that he said, and I had to trust him that because he had said he was going to bring Kennedy in before, in a
Yeah.
different capacity. I forget exactly what it was before, and he didn't do it. So it took a lot of trust that, is this really going to happen? Is he going to follow through? And is Kennedy really going to be able to get anywhere? Marty McCary, I was so happy about that. And, so many of these other people that he's appointed, I was really happy about those people, not Trump himself. So I don't think that he would have gotten as far as he did had he not brought Kennedy in. And, I wish the Democratic Party would have allowed me as a Democratic voter to vote on who they wanted to represent their party and not, whatever you want to call what happened. We should have been able to vote. There should have, whether Kennedy and bring in other people too, let us vote on the candidate that we want to represent us. I think that's what should have happened.
Biden wasn't a good initial choice, you don't think?
No.
Yeah,
And even they knew that, and they, they're so, yes, no.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that I think about this a lot, and I think there's a couple things that play in. I think they knew that Kamala Harris was not the answer, but they were hoping to be able to pull her across the edge the way that they had done Biden in 2020. But I think also that they were afraid. I think Bobby Kennedy scared the global elites, who really are the ones that are running the machine that is the Democrat Party right now. And I think, if you ask me, like I said, I think that they knew that there was a really good chance that if they actually had a real primary, that Bobby Kennedy, especially if they all knew that they were going to need to move on from Biden, right? And so that's the reason there was an early debate, is so that they would have the excuse to shift. But the reason that they didn't open it up earlier, I think, is because they thought there was a really good chance that Bobby would win, and be the nominee from the Democrat side. And then, they would have somebody else that's uncontrollable. Like, the worst thing that the deep state could want or the global elites, is to have two candidates that are not beholden to them. And so I think they intentionally boxed him out. And unfortunately for them, that's a big part of what pushed them. It was a historic moment when Kennedy got up there, and shared with the people that his decision, but not just the way. So what was interesting about it is he didn't just get up there and say, "I'm endorsing Trump." He went up, and I knew that that's what the speech was going to be, but I was watching it live, and he slowly worked through, this is where we were, this is where we've come, and this is what's happened. Because it wasn't just that the Democrat Party boxed him out of the Democrat primaries, but also they were trying to keep him off of ballots all across the country.
Oh, it was such a fight.
Yeah, there's a challenge here and there. As somebody who volunteered in his campaign, yeah, you know that better than anyone. And ultimately, that narrative is a big part of what pushed Trump over the edge.
Yeah. And I think too with Kamala, I think they were just banking on everyone's hate of Trump, being so great that they could give us anything and we would just accept that because we hate Trump so much. And Trump did something really smart. He's like, well, fine, you might not like me, but maybe you'll like all these other people that I'm going to pull in around me. And that's really what saved the election for him, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, making America healthy again is, obviously, I say obviously one more time, I think I'm going to run. I think I'll hit my quota and I won't be able to use it for another couple of weeks. But without that focus, I think Trump doesn't win. And this coalition, personally, here in the state of Maine, I think we were talking earlier, there's not a lot of like hope on the Democrat side of the aisle at this point in coming up with great policy. And so it seems to me that like what Trump did in 2020 or 2024, we need to do here in Maine in 2026. Like, what do you see as the challenges as somebody who's a registered Democrat, but also like really not beholden to any party? Like, what is it that you think is missing out of our state politics that would help, like, I think, help our state move in a positive direction?
We just have to let go of the labels. We have to let go of Democrat. We have to let go of Republican, and we have to start thinking with our brain instead of our ego. Until that happens, I don't think you can have really a good conversation. We need to be able to sit down and talk to, people about all these different things that are very important to humanity and to the people in the state and everywhere. But we can't. We're afraid. We have to. Well, am I going to hurt someone's feeling? It's okay to disagree. It's okay if I have a different opinion than you have. I have no less respect for you. You might love Trump and I might hate Trump. We have to be able to put those things aside and say, okay, this is the goal that I want to achieve. And at the end of the day, you're probably going to find they want to achieve the same exact goal. I don't sit here and think that, the Democrats in this state want us to just be sick and diseased and dependent on this broken healthcare system. I really don't think they go to bed at night thinking, how can I make them sicker? And I don't think that all the doctors but the system isn't broken. The system is exactly how it was created to function as a business. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, they put this together and they were very wise when they did it. And they created this amazing cash system, right? That makes certain pieces of it a lot of money. And that's not the doctors, surgeons, yes, but like not the MDs, and we need more of those people. And that's why we have such a shortage. When I went to a local chamber breakfast and the topic was the state of healthcare in Maine. And so there on the panel, there were people from St. Joe's and PCHC and a bunch of hospitals in the area. And Lori Dwyer, she's the president and CEO of PCHC, and she said the state of primary care was abysmal. And everybody agreed as to how the system isn't working with helping people, but no one talked about preventative care. No one talked about how the food pyramid is not what we should be eating and how the system that we created isn't working. And we have to get back to the basics, not processed food. Where, like I said, how many times have you heard Cheerios are good for your heart health? And yet Cheerios have more glyphosate in them than most of the other cereals on the shelves. No, we're ignoring that because of Monsanto and Bayer and all this other stuff. So we have to get back to real food and not what puts money in certain people's pockets, but what actually works. When you ask your doctor, if you go to your doctor and you've been diagnosed with diabetes, for example, ask him how many times in the last year or ever in your career were you able to help someone heal so that they no longer needed that medication? They're not going to be able to give you an answer. That's not what the system was created to do. So, if that's what you want and that's what you're looking for and you don't want to change anything and you just want to take the fire alarm out of the building, then by all means go there. But we have to, carve a different path if we want a different outcome. And that's what I think is happening around us with all the direct primary care options. People are waking up and realizing that we're throwing all this money into a sinking ship, and putting our money into the insurance model is not getting us very far.
Yeah, it's definitely not achieving better health in America. I think there was a statistic that was thrown around, like I think by Bobby. I shouldn't say thrown around, but 70-something% of Americans are unhealthy, are obese. Obese is the word, I think is that. And it's like there's an element of like, do you deal with food like specifically with like on that side?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like
now
part
they
of
want
the
to put
problem.
our kids on Ozempic instead of teaching them how to eat. But they also give them a bag with a banana and a Pop-Tart. And this is, and so even if you feed your child a good, healthy breakfast before they go to school, what child's turning down this Pop-Tart with food dyes and chemicals and loaded with sugar? They're not. So we're not educating them on the difference between fuel and entertainment. And all of a sudden we have a population that thinks that our food is supposed to be entertainment and not fuel. And we don't understand the difference between them. And you don't realize that, hey, if you ate really healthy, you actually start to like it and you start to crave it. And that's, so you change your taste buds and all of these things adapt. And you end up loving the food that you eat, because people will look at me and they'll say, oh, I couldn't be as healthy as you because I love food. I'm like, well, I love food too. I don't wake up every day and I say I'm going to eat some stuff that I really hate today. You love it as well, and you also get to love how it makes you feel. So we're not teaching kids or adults, and then we're parenting in the same way, the difference between these things, and what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, because it's a conversation, I think, about self-control and about delayed gratification. I think is another piece that we need to learn, right? Like to your point, like it's not a matter of like good food or about liking food or not liking food. It's about eating the right food. That maybe it doesn't have as much of a a chemical reaction in your brain and in the moment initially, but over time you end up feeling better. I'm one of those people that does diets, and I need to figure out how I'm going to do this better in my life. But like, I know that like when I get into a habit of eating more healthy, I feel better. Right.
Yeah.
But we've got so much in our world that's like pushing us to have pleasure, like the instant gratification, the easy pleasure. I mean, we're the fast food society, and like eating healthy is not hard necessarily, but it takes work. And you don't get at like, I mean, you're not eating ice cream every night. Like ice cream's amazing. And not to say that people shouldn't ever eat ice cream, but like, I think the frequency in which we eat things that aren't good for us, I think is a big part of the problem, isn't it? It's not that we eat
there's ice cream and then there's ice cream, right? There's ice cream with food dyes and chemicals, and then there's ice cream made from raw organic milk. And, so there's two, you can still have ice cream and have two completely different experiences too. And, you think about it, it's like drugs. When you're used to cocaine or heroin lighting up your brain, yes, nothing else is going to quite light up your brain like cocaine and heroin. But at the end of the day, when you've been off of drugs for a period of time, and the longer that you're off of drugs, and then your brain starts to learn how to respond to these normal things, that like all of a sudden now a piece of fruit, an apple, is just as yummy as that ice cream used to be. And oh my gosh, imagine that world. And that's what happens. So, and like I tell people, it's only hard until it's easy. Like brushing your teeth when you were 3 years old was really freaking hard, right? Like you cried, you complained, you did everything you could to avoid it. And here we are, you don't even think about it anymore. So, it being healthier and making better choices is just like that in the beginning. It's only hard until it's easy. And you will so appreciate both the food that you're eating and also how you're feeling because of it.
Yeah, no, and these are the types of conversations that we need more of in our society. But you made a comment earlier, and I think a big thing, we have access to the most information that we've ever been able to have access to at the internet, and then with especially with AI. So AI, I think, still needs to grow up a little bit before we can trust it with driving the car, but like with all these tools, we have so much access to information, and we can know more about what's healthy, and yet we're the least healthy that we've ever been. But I also think people aren't doing the research. I think I was slow and stubborn to the organic conversation, right? Like I had family members that were interested in organic foods, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to join that cult. That's how I looked at it, right? And over time, though, like I have an open mind, and I listen, and I do my research eventually. And like what we call organic food, I've mentioned on the podcast before, is what they used to just call food. Yeah. I think I've talked about labeling, like. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier who was like, doesn't like Bobby Kennedy as much. And what she was talking about was that like, she doesn't think that the government should tell people what they can and can't put in their body. Right. Which is in the sense of food. Like if I want to drink like diet Pepsi, which is probably unhealthy for me, I want to be able to do that. I don't want somebody, and like the truth is like Bobby Kennedy isn't talking about like just not allowing people to eat what they want to eat, but like making sure people are aware, labeling these things better, and making sure people know what they're putting in their body. And then as we educate people, they'll make better decisions. Or
if that is your decision to do exactly just that, that's your right to do. That's what you're choosing the body you want to live in. You're choosing the quality of life that you want, and knowing that you're choosing, as opposed to being told. Like when I talk about my health back then, I lived off of vodka and Red Bull and McDonald's. I mean, this was my life all day, every day. Pepsi. I never drank water. If you had told me back then, these decisions would change the outcome, I would have listened. I would have done it. But I had no idea. So, but if that's the life that you choose and that's the body you want to live in, knock yourself out. Nobody, you're absolutely right. You should not be told that you have to or you can't, but
Yep.
making an informed decision is the difference.
Well, yeah, and I think making an informed decision is. Oh shoot, there's a place that I was going to go with this. Oh yeah, with it, like should be that like organic food should be the one that's called food.
Yeah.
Non-organic food is the one that should have a label, right?
Yes.
Like, that's the crazy thing about our world, and there's also the fact that like I'll ask this question. Why is it that healthy food is more expensive than unhealthy food?
Well, first, food should cost money. We've been programmed to think because there's so much chemicals in our food now that we've been able to reduce, well, chemicals in our food, right? That we've been able to reduce the costs so much that now we look at real food that is made as it should be without chemicals and the legitimate cost of that. And we say, oh, well, they're raking us over the coals for good, healthy food, and it should be the reverse. No, food is supposed to cost money. Animals that are cared for should cost more than animals that are pumped full of chemicals and shots and antibiotics and grain and all that kind of stuff when they should be eating grass and what have you. So there should be a cost associated with our food. So I think that's one thing that we have a little bit, we need to look at our belief system there and understand, like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Chemicals should be cheap and real food should cost money. So that's the one thing that I think I want to put out there. And then the other thing is when you're eating real food, you don't have all of this other filler food that you're paying for. Every single person that works with me, I don't know of anyone that I work with that would disagree with me. When they start working with me, same thing. Oh, well, this chicken is more expensive and this meat is more expensive. But when you're eating healthy food and when you're eating nutrient dense food and you're no longer consuming all of this filler food, the money that you save there is much greater than the extra money you're going to spend over here for real food. So at the end of the day, your food, I don't know anybody that spends less than I do on groceries. Yes, the individual components may be more expensive, but I'm not buying all of the other things that the average person is consuming. So I'm not spending that money. So I'd rather spend a little bit more on the individual items than the alternative. So I think that's another important point to make too.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. I think in general, this gets at, I may have said this earlier, or maybe this was before the podcast started, but like how the problems in our society need to be fixed by society, not necessarily by the government. And I think there are governmental changes that need to happen, but what we're talking about here is just making wise and healthy decisions, right? And the reality is like everybody, you mentioned earlier that you give people hope that change is possible, that there is actually hope for them to be able to recover and heal. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And like the data that you've presented, I think as well is like saying, well, I mean, if you're not like looking at it holistically, which is holistic medicine is what you're focused on, right? But if you're not looking at it holistically, you're like, that's more expensive. But then it's like the question is like, number one, I worked in banking and I used to see people's accounts and what they spend money on. And I would say like, you guys waste so much money. So like, it's so expensive, but well, if you have to sacrifice like the stuff that you're doing that you don't need to do, that's unhealthy for you and is not good for you, is that really a problem? But you have like specific, like, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and look at how much they spend, like you said, on all of the other things, right? And how much is it costing you in healthcare now that you're a diabetic, or now that you have blood pressure issues, or now that you have cholesterol issues? How much are you paying out of pocket for these medications, these tests? How much time is it taking out of your work to go to these health appointments? I know for me, when I was sick back then, I mean, the appointments, and you'd sit there and sometimes it would take a whole day out of work to go to these appointments. And then you have to go for your follow-up, and it's very time consuming. So how much are you losing in your quality of life? How much are you spending for your healthcare to now try to manage, because that's the best that you're going to do, is possibly manage it if you're lucky, this situation that you've now created. So what's that chicken cost?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So like when you look at it holistically, it's a lot less expensive. And you were hyper focused if you're just talking about food alone, that if you look at all the different things that people are buying, and shift it to, eating healthy and wise, there people are going to be spending less money actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's a
people like
really good
say like,
point.
when they work with me and they're like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm not allowed to have that anymore," whatever the food is. And it's like, "No, you're allowed to have whatever you want. You get to choose." And I make that very clear to them. But I'm going to educate you as much as I possibly can on why that might not be the outcome that you want to have. And the more they learn, the more they're like, "Oh, you're right. That's just not worth it. You're right. That's just not worth it." And they do it for a short period of time, and they're like, "Oh, I feel so much better. I can't believe that this could make that big of a difference this fast. Is this really possible?" They're like, "This is going to go away, right? This is like the honeymoon stage, and then it's not going to feel the same." And I'm like, "No, that's not the case. It's going to keep getting better. I promise you." You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no. Ugh, my brain is shutting off. Yeah, I think like I've had some experience with doing different diets, and again, what my life needs is a little bit more consistency. But when you look at what's going on, I think what started to help me see some of this stuff actually was you mentioned that you got started in your chiropractor's office. I had a chiropractor that I used to go to that you know put me on a specific diet for a period of time to address some things, and just like how I felt like 4 or 5 days into the diet was just like night and day, so much better than I had been feeling based on the stuff. And so like a lot of these foods that were like so adamant that I could never live without this food, like I mean, like how important is a temporary, I think about food in general is like even food that's good, it's like it's this temporary, very short term
Mhm.
pleasure, right? We
Yeah.
eat it, and for like 15 seconds, maybe we're tasting it, and then it's gone, right? And so if we've got this one thing in our life that we really like and we want to be able to have, but if that's all that it's giving us, is it really worth it? Right. And I think these are questions we
Meanwhile,
need to
being
ask.
able to run around with your grandkids and being able to show up at your kids' high school graduation in some cases, or walk through Europe on a vacation with your wife because now you've retired, that's gratification that is going to last so much more than these short little blips of highlights. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm thankful that there are people out there that are, that are focused on trying to help people here in the state of Maine, mostly the Bangor area. I imagine people don't travel too far to see you. Do you guys do virtual at all, or is it all
We
in
do
person?
virtual. I have people all over the US that I work with.
Okay, so if people are interested in reaching out, they can. And how do they find you?
My website is thrivingproof.com. And they could always
Okay.
call the office 207-358-0748, and we'll get them started.
All right. Anything else, like any like quick little tidbits, things that you think people should be aware of outside of the fact that Cheerios is bad?
Eat real food. At the end of the day, eat real food. Your body, we don't talk about diet. We don't call them diets. We educate you on return on investment. You're a banker, right?
Yep.
So what is this going to cost my system, and what type of return am I going to get out of it? And that's really what we focus on, helping people to understand. And once you start to build on that foundation, your outcome is going to be very different.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you're talking about the cost of things too, I want to back up a little bit, and part of why I was going in this direction is like, if you listen to, there was a Joe Rogan episode with Casey and Callie Means, I should
Means,
say.
yeah.
Incredible episode. It's going to be so much better than this. If you're listening, go listen to that. It's, as much as Jen is great, like those two, just like kind of, they go into so many different categories. It's over 3 hours long. But one of the things that they highlighted that just blew my mind, I didn't realize this. People talk about like, why is good food so expensive and bad food so inexpensive? Well, part of the answer is, I think you've already answered that, like, oh, if you're paying attention, it's actually less expensive if you're being wise. But in addition to that, even individual items, like the government literally subsidizes,
Yes.
ultra processed food, which is the worst possible food. Calling it food, I think you used quotes earlier. I think when we say ultra processed food, we can use those quotes, right? And so the government, hopefully, with Bobby in his current role, we're gonna make some adjustments there and stop subsidizing I personally would be okay with not subsidizing any food. I think that people can just make food and farmers can grow food and they can sell it, but definitely not. But if we have to subsidize something, let's subsidize organic food.
Yes.
If we're going to do anything, right? But I'm good with not subsidizing either. But yeah, that's one of the problems and one of the reasons that ultra processed food. I remember, like, just as an aside, I remember, like, I sometimes, like, don't plan well. That's half of my problem, and I'm like, well, here I am, and I need to go. I need some food, but I want something to be healthy. So you go into but I got to be quick. So I'm in the convenience store, and, like, almost nothing in the convenience store is edible and healthy, right? Like, the closest thing I can find, and I'd be interested to hear if you condemn me for this too, is like the Kind bars, the Kind protein bars, because they're actually like real. It's actually real food, right? Am I wrong?
Uh, there's good, better, best. This is what I tell people. I will never condemn you for what you eat, but there's good, better, best. If that was the best choice that you could make in that environment, then that's the best choice that you could make. Hopefully, then that leads you to, okay, how can I be more prepared next time? What systems can I put into place, just like you would in business? What systems can I put into place so I'm not in that situation again? And it's like a bank account. If you're constantly depositing into your bank account with actual good, real, unprocessed food, then the one-offs where you kind of get stuck for something unplanned and you have to eat a Kind bar, it's not the end of the world. You're making a little bit of a withdrawal, but you've got that bank account there. So these are the things that we want to focus on more than should I eat that or not? Was it the best choice in that environment? It probably was the best choice.
Yeah, I mean, like, when you're at the grocery store, I mean, not the grocery store, but at the convenience store, there really aren't, like, before I discovered these, I was just like, there's nothing, right? And, like, there are a couple other, like, protein bars that probably would be in a category that would be like some of the best stuff that you could get there. But ultimately, the long and short is there's not a really good option. I need to plan and prepare better, and that's something I got to work on. But either way, yeah, all right. Well, thanks so much. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on and being willing. I know that you're not really a political person. It's not something that you tend to engage in. And it's unfortunate that the healthcare and not healthcare, but I guess this is, but health, like, improving your health and things like that is, a political thing because I don't know, the Democrats are crazy and you would argue
there's no Democratic children and there's no Republican children. There's just children. We're just people, and we want to be as healthy as possible. That's it.
Yeah, and with the global elites that are largely controlled by big food, big pharma, big what's the other one? Anyway, don't want us to be big medicine, I guess we could say, don't want us to be healthy because they want to profit off of our decline. But we can push back against that, and we're thankful that Bobby Kennedy is in the role that he's in, kind of helping with that fight. So yeah, just thanks again for coming on. And so everybody else, we'll see you. I think Thursday, I've got somebody coming on. I should know, but Thursday we'll be back for the next one. Have a great week.